Hello, my name is James Hooper and this is an urgent open letter to parents of children with asthma. Beware the vicious hidden danger. This is specifically if your child gets asthma that comes and goes. My simple, easy to understand training drill can break that cycle forever. You know that being a parent can be tough and you have to balance a whole range of issues. We all just do our best. With asthma, we hate it that our kids are affected, but we stay calm and keep them as safe as we can. Once we decide how we'll deal with it, we sensibly follow that program. Today I'm solemnly going to ask you to take a few minutes to listen openly and decide for yourself if any change to how you help your child deal with his asthma or her asthma is needed. The information in this video and the free chapter is just that, free. It's designed to help children, there's nothing to sell, and you can simply work it out from this particular video and the one that follows it, which is also free. Now, if you listen to the end, you'll also be able to recognize two patterns in the way that the asthma begins in your child. You might get both, you might get one, but you'll definitely recognize at least one. When you see the patterns, you'll also see how the simple breathing drills, and the breathing drills are a story which explains it for children, and then some very specific exercises, how these exercises and drills just might work. The exercises are based on results proven in modern hospital clinical trials overseen by senior asthma specialists. Now, I mention this right now because that will arise in the back of your mind as you watch the rest of this video. Let's begin. So, if your child has episodic asthma, pay a particular attention. In this video I'm going to share a simple and drug-free asthma cycle bursting process. 2, how your child's episodic asthma starts and progresses, and 3, exactly what you need to know to help your child break the asthma cycle. So this video, which is part A, and the one that follows it is part B, we'll go through those. There's nothing else to do, just watch it and see if it's suitable for you. Now, these are big claims. They are supported by hospital trials and published clinical research. You can find those on my site when needed, but just know that they are. If they are true, you may soon discover the key to helping your child evade decades of misery from asthma and related ills. So how did I come across this information? Well, I'm going to share that with you so you can use the clues to help crack the code for your children. Hearing my story first will help you get some powerful clues that you can use to help figure asthma out. I did, and I have trained thousands to do the same. First, I had severe asthma as a child. It was episodic, which means that it varied in severity. Sometimes it would be hardly present at all, other times it was a horror with 4-hourly nebulizers, oral prednisolone, plus other drugs that have been discontinued because of the severe side effects. My experience as a child was 40 years ago. The drugs are better now. My parents had very little idea about asthma or the effect it had on me. They were awesome and simply did their best to what the doctors told them. What most people did not realize then, that my childhood was spent in a very clear and powerful sleep deprivation. It was there constantly because even a slight amount of asthma destroyed my sleep pattern. I did not know any better. I just assumed it was normal. I was very, very keen on sports and managed to become quite fit despite relying almost completely on puffers to do almost anything. Every day was filled with as much sport as I could find. Living in an outback country town in Australia at the time was awesome. Soccer, football, squash, cricket, tennis. There was something on every day or practice for it. But despite my own massive enthusiasm and unrelenting work ethic, I could not crack the big time in any of the sports because I could not breathe. I knew I could do better, but it never happened. The same happened in school as well. I was as smart as a whip, well, I thought I was, and at times I would simply crush the schoolwork. But over time I was affected by lack of sleep and my averages dropped. What I'm saying is that asthma symptoms are not the only consideration when looking at your child's situation. Even if the symptoms are well controlled by drugs, there is a cost. When I had more of the drugs, I would become hyper. I could not think clearly, not rest properly, not eat well, because I was continually seeking to change my state with food. You probably know that eating sweet things make you feel better when you're up or stressed, which is why we eat ice cream when we're upset. Well, I ate like a horse, even though I was a skinny little guy. Over the decades, I've come to an understanding of my asthma. I studied science at university in biochemistry, and then worked for a multinational pharmaceutical company for about 8 years. Why? Because I figured they had the best resources for me to burrow into. And burrow I did. I learned every possible thing that the drug industry had on asthma, and there was a lot. Despite that, my own asthma remained. It varied just as I did when I was a child, but it was always there. There were times when it completely disappeared, almost, like when I was learning Kung Fu, which involved ridiculous amount of abdominal and core work. If I can find the right slide. We would do between 200 and 400 sit-ups with punches each session, and that was 5 times a week. I mention sit-ups because that is a clue to the process I will show you shortly that will help free your child from asthma. Over the next 8 years while working with the pharma company as a specialist rep, I came to wonder simply, how do some people grow out of asthma? And I began to track and research as deeply as this allowed. And do remember, this was before the internet. I knew that my asthma varied, so that logically, if I could work out why it varied, I could change the conditions I was in, and it would vary itself out of existence. So I became a tester. I tested diet first. With massive discipline, I tested everything from vegan to fruitarian to the prudent diet, high protein, high fat, like Atkins, then low everything, and on and on. My asthma would vary, but diet was only part of the model, and the changes only happened for a short time. Then one day in 1993 I saw a TV report about a Russian breathing method being promoted by some dodgy-looking people in Sydney. They looked dodgy at first because the TV program was attempting to paint them as con artists taking advantage of the victims of asthma. The program showed people doing breath-holding exercises and did interviews with people who had finished their workshop with these Russians. In that TV program, in the follow-up programs, it turned out that everyone was much better. Most people in the workshops were massively reducing and even stopping their relief medication as their symptoms were gone over the course of a week or sometimes 2. The TV program went from being on expose the scare mode to why did the doctors not tell us about this mode? They interviewed specialists and professors who simply claimed that the attendees had simply grown out of asthma during that week. The children attendees in particular had remarkable improvements, but everyone was improved. I was hooked. I contacted the Russian, whose name was Sasha Stolmatsky. He was a very gruff-sounding but very genuine man with only some English. I said I wanted to know more about how it worked. He said I understood biochemistry very well, and could they send me some studies or models. The document they sent was a heavy-duty, badly photocopied 23-page excerpt called The Biochemical Basis of K.P. Butaker's Theory of Disease of Deep Respiration, which had only just been translated at the time from Russian. As I read this document, which is one of the best articles in the biochemistry of carbon dioxide that I've ever seen, my mind went into an overdrive. It was very clear from the chemistry that my asthma symptoms were generated by my body as the direct response to my breathing pattern. According to this, without any further instructions, I tested the theory on myself. Probably very rashly, I began to breathe in the way that, according to the amazing document, should make my asthma worse, almost immediately. I gave myself asthma, then reversed it 3 times in a row. took about 40 seconds of breathing for a very definite wheeze. I kept going just a bit longer and it was getting worse. I had my puffer ready, but the second part of the test was if I could reduce the symptoms just by doing the reverse breathing pattern. That was simple, but definitely not easy. I essentially almost suffocated myself for 55 seconds and the wheeze was gone. My nose was unblocked and I felt good. Okay, that was very interesting. So I did it again. I brought on the asthma symptoms. This time it took a little bit longer, then relieved them. And again. And then I had to sit down for a while as the implication of what I had just done became clear. If we jump forward in time, I had left my cushy pharmaceutical job and taken all the training that Sasha Stelmatsky and his team could deliver and charged off to help people with asthma. I ran workshops in many parts of the world and had pretty much awesome results everywhere. People no longer needing puffers. Over time they stopped and reduced their steroids. Then people with sleep apnea and other conditions began to discover the amazing benefits of this process as well. The point is that in every workshop for a dozen years, every person who had asthma was able to reduce symptoms out of nowhere and then reverse them in only minutes with no drugs needed. There are some cases where this test is not done, but asthmatics can usually do it without extreme risk. People with classical migraine epilepsy should avoid it, and people with blood sugar issues should be expertly watched. So what has this got to do with your child? Or you? First, as a parent, if your child is less than about 18 years of age, they can apply a fairly blunt and direct approach to stopping their asthma symptoms. If you're older than that, you need to apply a slightly gentler method, as your breathing system is less flexible. More on that soon. Asthma attack at a birthday party. How it happens. First, let's talk about a fairly common event for parents with asthmatic children. Usually before the asthma appears, there may be an exertion. For example, playing very happily, running around having a great time, maybe a birthday party where it is all very exciting. You might notice your child running and laughing and yelling. Then you notice that they begin to either cough or have gone very quiet with a wheeze. You may bolt over to them and spray a puffer into them and the attack may cease, or it may get worse. And within a few hours the cough is constant and they are very distressed. And you either follow your asthma program or take them to the ER for nebulizers of drug cocktails. Generally that calms them down. You get to take some oral steroids home with you, which you give to your child over the next few days or week. Let's try another version. Another version is with episodic asthma in children begins as you notice your child has a blocked nose, perhaps a slight head cold and snuffles. With the pattern you see that not long after that your child begins to cough, which increases in frequency and depth until once again it is very clearly asthma. You follow your routine, usually with a combination of drugs, maybe a hospital visit, and then it resolves a few days or a week later until next time. What parents do not realise about the effects of almost having asthma on children. Now I'm talking about this because it's just not asthma that you need to be aware of. During this time there are no obvious symptoms. You believe your child is fine, and that is the reason I'm sharing my growing up story. It is not fine. If your child is on the verge of having asthma from a head cold or a great play sessions, other things are also not right. Their concentration may be weaker, their sleep quality low. And because of this you will likely notice behavioural issues. Shorter temper, won't sit still for long, maybe a little angry or just very easily annoyed. Ability in sports will be reduced, and recovery after exertion not as fast as it might be. Okay, I have talked enough. If you've read or heard this video so far, you'll be nodding your head at some parts. So I'm going to ask you to decide to check what I've said above. Do your own research, ask people who you respect, Google it, test it on yourself, do whatever you need to do that will either allow you to teach this to children or to rule it out. If your child's asthma does follow the similar pattern, for example the head cold and the birthday party exertion, there are some very clear steps you can follow. You'll find those in the following video in part B. To find part B, if it's not immediately here, go to buteyko-technique.com and on the index page down the bottom, click on Next Page. I'm James Hooper. Thank you for listening.